Have you ever stopped to think that the kind of person you are might be determining the course of your spiritual life? There are 4 very distinct types of people, and each one reacts differently to the Word of God. Are you among those who let opportunities slip away? Or are you like Job, who persevered and reaped incredible rewards, even in the midst of the greatest trials? Stay with me, because today, you're going to discover something that could transform your faith journey, and perhaps your life will never be the same again. The first type of person is what I like to call the passive listener. You know that moment when you're sitting in a service, a meeting, or even receiving advice? You're physically present, but inwardly, your mind is wandering elsewhere. Maybe you're thinking about the worries of the week, the bills that need to be paid, or even something trivial like what you're going to have for dinner. You're hearing, but you're not really listening. Jesus described this type of person in the parable of the sower. In Matthew 13:4, he says, "As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up." Here, the seed represents the Word of God, and the passive listener is like the soil along the path. The message is sown, but it doesn't find a place to grow. It stays on the surface, never sinking into the heart. And what happens? The birds, which symbolize the evil one, quickly come and snatch that seed away. Jesus explains this clearly in verse 19. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The word arrives, but without understanding and reflection, it is soon lost. It's like water falling on the surface of a stone. No matter how much it rains, the stone remains dry because there's no depth for the water to penetrate. Think about that for a moment. How many times has this happened to you? How many times have you been in a sermon, a class, or even a conversation that had the potential to deeply move you, yet you left without remembering much? Why? Because your mind was distracted, and the daily worries caused the message to slip away. Perhaps you left a service feeling like you didn't learn anything. But in reality, could it have been the distractions and an inattentive heart that prevented the seed from taking root? The truth is, we have all been this passive listener at some point. Let's make a comparison. Imagine you're watching a movie with friends, but your phone keeps buzzing, you're responding to messages, or checking social media. You might be watching the movie, but you're not truly absorbing the story. When someone talks about plot, you realize you missed the details, that you didn't grasp the depth of the characters. The movie passed before you, but you didn't experience it. Similarly, the passive listener lets the message pass by without it finding a place to take root. Now, I ask you, how often have you been that passive listener in your spiritual life? What is preventing you from truly absorbing what God is trying to tell you? Is it the fast pace of everyday life, the never-ending to-do list, or perhaps even the fear that God might ask something of you that you're not ready to give? And what if, for a moment, you decided to silence the noise around you? What if you began to listen to the Word of God as something precious, something that could completely change your life? Imagine how different your life could be if, instead of letting the birds steal the seed, you stored it in the soil of your heart, allowing it to take deep root and transform every part of who you are. Passive listener. Do you see yourself in this type of person? How would it feel to let the Word of God penetrate deeply into your soul, instead of merely gliding over the surface? What changes could that bring to your life? Now that we've discussed the passive listener, let's move on to the second type of person, the superficial enthusiast. Perhaps you know someone like this, or you might even see yourself in this description. This is the person who, upon hearing the Word of God or an inspiring message, is filled with enthusiasm. Their heart races, their eyes light up, and they are overwhelmed with motivation. It's as if suddenly everything makes sense and nothing could stop them. Jesus spoke precisely about this type of person in the parable of the sower. In Matthew 13:5-6, he says, "Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root." The faith of this person sprouts quickly, like flour that suddenly appears among the rocks. But when the sun, symbolizing difficulties, comes up, this faith lacking deep roots withers and dies. Jesus explains further in Matthew 13, verse 20 to 21. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. This person is excited at first, but when the first signs of trouble arise, whether it's criticism, failure, or an unexpected hardship, their faith and enthusiasm vanish as if they never existed. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever started something with great energy and determination, only to find that as challenges arose, all that initial passion seemed to drain away? At the beginning, you thought, this is it, it's going to work. But as soon as the first difficulty showed up, that excitement began to fade. It's like starting a marathon full of energy, but feeling like your legs won't cooperate after just the first mile. Let's bring this into real life. Imagine someone who decides to start a new project or even to change an important habit. In the first few days, they are full of energy, telling everyone, making ambitious plans, and already imagining the results. But then an obstacle appears. Maybe it's fatigue, a lack of support, or simply the reality that doesn't change as quickly as imagined. What happens? The enthusiasm evaporates, and that person quits before they've truly begun. And spiritually, how many times have you been that person? Perhaps you gave yourself to God in a moment of great emotion or made promises to completely change your life. But soon difficulties arose, doubts crept in, and you started to drift away, like a plant that cannot root deeply in the soil. What's missing? Roots. Roots are what keep a plant alive, even under the scorching sun. In the spiritual realm, deep roots come from a life of constant prayer, study of the Word, and a firm commitment that goes beyond the emotions of the moment. When your roots are deep, tribulations may come, but your faith remains steadfast. Now let's dig a little deeper. Have you ever stopped to consider how different your life could be if, instead of merely reacting emotionally, you prepared for the challenges ahead? What if, instead of giving up at the first obstacle, you faced difficulties with confidence, knowing your faith was firmly rooted? How would your life change if instead of withering, you flourished, even under the heat of adversity? Now imagine that you are this plant, but instead of being on rocky soil, your roots are deeply embedded in fertile ground. When the sun comes, yes, it burns and it tires you out, but your roots are nourished by a constant source of life. You withstand it. You grow. You flourish. This could be your life if you choose to invest in the roots, not just the leaves. Superficial enthusiast. Do you see yourself in this type of person? What if next time you truly committed, allowing your faith to grow such deep roots that no difficulty could tear you away? Now let's talk about the third type of person, the overburdened. This person starts off well. They hear the word of God, open their heart, and for a time, it seems like they will thrive spiritually. They get involved, they feel God's presence, and they genuinely want to live according to what they've learned. But then life happens. Responsibilities start to weigh them down. Work, finances, social expectations, and even the desire to make it in life begin to take over, like weeds growing around a plant. And what was once a vibrant faith starts to get suffocated, slowly, almost without notice. Jesus described this powerfully in Matthew 13, verse 7. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. The seed fell, it started to grow, but the thorns, the cares of this world, eventually took over its space. In Matthew 13:22, Jesus gives us more insight. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. Here Jesus speaks of those who started on the right path, but were diverted by the pressures of life and the lure of wealth. Has this ever happened to you? At first, you feel like you're on the right track. Your moments of prayer are full of life. You get involved in the things of God with enthusiasm. But then, the worries start piling up. The pressure of work, the never-ending bills, the feeling that there's never enough time. And suddenly, your spiritual life takes a back seat. That time you used to set aside for prayer or reading the Bible gets eaten up by the demands of life. It seems like there's always something more urgent, something that can't wait. Let's make a more practical comparison. Imagine you are a plant growing in a garden. In the beginning, you have plenty of space to grow and the sunlight nourishes you. But gradually, weeds start to appear. At first, they are small, almost unnoticeable. But over time, they grow, wrap themselves around you, steal your nutrients, and block out the sunlight. If you don't do something, they will completely choke you. That's how life's worries work. Small but constant, growing around us, consuming our attention, until the time and energy that should be dedicated to God are overtaken by these distractions. Now think about how this plays out in your daily life. Maybe you started your walk of faith with dedication, but work-related concerns began to pile up. If I just work one more hour, I can get this done. Or maybe the responsibilities at home started to weigh on you, taking care of family, keeping everything in order. Then came financial pressures. I need to earn more. I need to reach this goal. And before you realize it, the time you used to set aside for your faith, that space reserved for God, has been completely taken over by these weeds. And what about the allure of wealth? We're not necessarily talking about a greedy desire for money. Often, it's something more subtle. The desire for security, stability, or to reach a certain level of comfort. You begin to focus so much on providing, on achieving that financial goal, that your mind becomes fixated on it. Gradually, you find that the pursuit of material things has begun to take the place of your pursuit of God. Do you find yourself in this situation? How many times have you wanted to dedicate more time to God, but the pressures of the world seemed louder? It's a dangerous cycle. We think, when things calm down, I'll focus on my relationship with God again. But the truth is, things never calm down. There will always be more work, more responsibilities, more worries, and if you don't take action, those thorns will continue to grow, choking your faith until it becomes fruitless. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine if you could slowly start to pull out those thorns. If, instead of being overwhelmed by worries and the desire to accumulate more, you could free yourself from those entanglements. How would your life be different if, instead of being suffocated by the demands of the world, your faith had the space to grow freely? The overburdened, do you see yourself in this type of person? And what can you do today to start cutting away the thorns that are suffocating your relationship with God? Now we come to the fourth and final type of person, the persistent achiever. This is the type of person we all aspire to be. It's the one who hears the word of God, deeply understands its meaning, and even when life throws challenges their way, they stand firm. Their faith has deep roots, and they know that even in the face of adversity, the fruit will come. This type of person doesn't give up. They understand that the journey of faith is not easy, but their determination is unwavering. In time, they reap a harvest, a plentiful harvest. Jesus describes this person in Matthew 13:8. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Here the seed represents the word of God, which finds a fertile heart, soil that is ready to receive and nurture the message. And the result? An incredible harvest, multiplied many times over. This person not only survives life's challenges, but thrives spiritually, producing an abundance of fruit. As Jesus explains in Matthew 13:23, but the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. A great example of a persistent achiever is Job. He is the living portrait of this type of deep-rooted faith that doesn't depend on circumstances, but on unshakable trust in God, even when the world seems to be falling apart. Job lost everything: his wealth, his health, even his children. His friends accused him and his wife advised him to give up, but he refused to abandon his faith. In the midst of pain and loss, Job declared, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. Can you imagine such persistence? Job was tested in every area of his life, yet he remained steadfast because his roots were deeply planted in God. Even without understanding why all this was happening, he did not waver. That is what it means to be a persistent achiever. It's not about never facing difficulties. Job faced the worst, but rather standing firm in faith, trusting God even when the storm is overwhelming. Let's bring this to everyday life. Imagine someone going through an unexpected loss, perhaps losing a job that supported their family, While many would despair, the persistent achiever, like Job, stands firm. They may feel the weight of the difficulty, they may even weep through the night, but their deep roots keep them grounded. They know that even though the present seems bleak, God is in control, and they do not give up. They keep praying, they keep believing, and their faith, instead of withering, grows. Why? Because they understand that the roots of faith are not nourished by the circumstances of the moment, but by trust in the unchanging character of God. Now, think about yourself. How many times have you faced difficult moments where it felt like everything was crumbling around you? Maybe it was an unexpected illness, a financial crisis, or even a broken relationship. In those moments, it's easy to feel alone without the strength to continue. But the persistent achiever knows that these are precisely the moments when their faith is tested and refined. Job is the living example of this. He persisted, and in the end, God restored him, giving him even more than he had before. The fruits came, not just material ones, but spiritual ones, fruits of a faith that endured the trial. What does it mean to bear fruit in the life of a persistent achiever? It's not just about material or visible achievements. The fruits they reap are spiritual, unshakable peace in the midst of the storm, quiet confidence in God even when everything else says otherwise. They also become an example to others. The people around them observe their resilience, their perseverance, and it inspires and encourages. Their life becomes a source of faith for those who witness it, just as Job's story continues to inspire millions to this day. Let's make a more vivid comparison. Imagine a giant tree in the middle of a forest. It didn't become the tallest tree because it never faced storms. On the contrary, it grew so tall precisely because, during the fiercest storms, its roots dug even deeper into the earth. The wind may have broken some of its branches, but its roots kept it standing. Now, it's a lush tree whose fruit feeds those who take shelter under its shade. That was Job, and that is the persistent achiever. They are strengthened through adversity, and their growth benefits not only themselves but everyone around them. And what if you could be that person? Think for a moment. What if, instead of being overwhelmed by life's challenges, you decided to dig your roots even deeper into God? What if, instead of giving up, you chose to persist, knowing that in the end the fruits will come? Fruits of faith, of peace, of a life that impacts other lives. The persistent achiever, like Job, doesn't just survive difficulties. They flourish in them. You can be that person, the persistent achiever. Do you see yourself in this type of person? If not yet, what can you do today to start planting your roots more deeply and reap the fruits that God has already prepared for you?